Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by David of Yo Mamas. David, thank you so much for taking the time.
Cameron, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to kick things off, I'd like to start out with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
Yeah, I grew up here in Clearwater, Florida, Cameron. Um, I'm a first generation American, so both of my parents came from Egypt, and I would say that my upbringing was really geared around food. My
Yeah,
my mom was an amazing cook and still is today, and really did a special job of gathering people around the table through just really good food. So that was a big part of my upbringing and ultimately a big part of how I ended up starting Yo Mama's
mm,
Foods.
incredible. What would you say were some of your interests growing up? Maybe athletics or entrepreneurship? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I started sports early on. I quickly got into tennis and swimming after trying some team sports that I wasn't really good at, like basketball or soccer. Well, as far as my interest, I tell people I was raised outside. So we didn't really have screens when I was growing up, which is nice. But still, I still enjoy being outside. Um, but yeah, ultimately, I would say, it was pretty aggressive with a busy schedule around school and sports afterwards, and really geared towards setting up, I guess, what my future interest would be, which was always entrepreneurship. So
Mm,
in the early days, I would be doing lemonade stands and then cookie stands in the neighborhood, and it just had a big interest in a variety of subjects from being a kid.
yeah.
Architecture, just ultimate things that I'm obviously still interested in today.
Mm, amazing. Well, I saw you went on to study at the University of Florida. I'm curious, what did you study there, and then what led you to go there as well?
Yeah, I studied business there, and then I did my master's in international business as well. And University of Florida was just a great foundational learning ground for me. I think I quickly got into all their entrepreneurship programs and their business program, and was just really kind of interested in learning from other entrepreneurs at that time. So I think that they had a fantastic program there and allowed me to kind of expand my mind. I didn't know, what specifically I wanted to start.
Mhm.
I was kind of curious as far as what type of business I wanted to run, but it was really a good learning platform and a really good school for
Mhm.
me to start exploring what was out there.
Yeah. I'm curious, what did post graduation look like? So before Yo Mamas, what did that career journey look like? I know you went to Deloitte for some time. I'm curious, what did that trajectory look like?
Yeah, so I went to Deloitte Consulting after school, and that was another great training ground for me. I knew I didn't want to work in corporate America forever, but I knew that
Mhm.
I needed to kind of get some more foundational basics under my belt before going to start a business. So
Mhm.
again, I didn't know what I wanted to start at that time, but that was another really good training ground that exposed me to a lot of different businesses, a lot of different problems, and allowed me to hone in more on what I was interested in.
Mm. So you mentioned kind of the passion and interest in entrepreneurship and not knowing at that time. I'm curious, at what point did the realization of like getting into food and pasta, what was that, would you say?
Yeah, so it was when I was at Deloitte and I was eating out a lot. Um, I was eating another brand of pasta sauce, and I
Mhm.
just wasn't feeling well. I was getting really bad heartburn. I had stomach problems, and that was really the wake up call that I had that the food that I was eating wasn't making me feel good. So I started
Mm.
to look into the grocery stores at what I was eating, and I started to understand that half of the stuff that is in the grocery stores are things that my mom did not cook with. There's gums, there's fillers, there's preservatives, and
Mm.
that was really the idea. Um, that's when I started to go, I think, down a deeper route into packaged foods and
Mm.
really kind of came up with this concept of how do we create a brand around only using ingredients that mom has in her pantry.
I love it. So what did those early like R&D process days look like? I'm curious, kind of experimenting with the different formulas.
Yeah, so everything's based off of grandma's recipe. So
Wow.
it's just clean. So it's fresh tomatoes, fresh basil, fresh onion, fresh garlic, no added sugar. Um, and I knew that I needed to start on fast moving items, so things
Mhm.
that customers use quickly. I use sauce regularly. Obviously, I use salad dressings, pizza sauces. So that was really the idea and how we wanted to kind of focus. As
Mhm.
far as R&D, Cameron, I'm a visual learner, so the very first thing that I did was design the brand and the logo, and I worked with a friend from UF actually. Excuse me,
Mhm.
Madeline.
Mm.
Madeline was a graphic designer at the time, also working in corporate America, kind of looking to do something else. So I worked with her first on kind of designing what this brand looked like. And as soon as I saw the brand, that allowed us to kind of really start building. And from there, I went to multiple co-packers with our recipes, and all of them said no because we weren't
Mhm.
using all the preservatives and all the added
Mm.
sugars, and it was a very, I'd say, challenging build. And ignorance is bliss. I didn't know
Yeah.
everything that I know today, which I think is a good competitive advantage because if I knew everything I knew today, I wouldn't have had the courage to ultimately do it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, what did that shift look like? So when the co-packer or no co-packers were actually taking you on, what did that look like then moving forward?
Yeah, it was really the school of hard knocks, Cameron. So you had to kind of I had to figure things out. So I would say the first 3 years was really building what the supply chain looked like and
Mm.
designing that and trying to be as economically driven as possible because in retail that you have to carve out room for a distributor, you have to carve out room for the stores to collect margin, you have to collect you have to work with brokers. So it's a very challenging model that
Mm.
again I didn't understand at that time. But I think, focusing and working, 120-hour weeks,
Yeah.
days a week, I tell people you get hit by a bus every single day and you stand up and you get hit by a bigger bus tomorrow. So
Yeah.
you just keep on going. But um, the supply chain was a big challenge. And, again, not something that I had expertise in, not something that I had previous knowledge in or training on.
Mhm.
But ultimately, found the right partners who we still work with today.
Mm. Something I find intriguing is it's self-funded fully. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Um, yeah, in those early days, what did that look like as far as like a manufacturing run? Were you holding inventory at all? Or I'm curious, what did that rollout look like?
Yeah. So I put my whole life savings into our first production run, which was 54 cases of pasta sauce at
Wow.
$5.23 a bottle.
Wow.
So that was not a sustainable business model because by the time it made it on the grocery shelf, it was like 18.99, Cameron.
Wow.
Um, so a good principle is, a rule of five is you want to design a product that can then be multiplied by five to get to the final retail price, and that's how you build margin for the business. That's how you build room for the distributor, the broker, the retail
Mhm.
store. Again, all principles that I didn't have an understanding of at that time, but that I ultimately learned.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say the route that we went without taking any outside capital is not traditional in consumer packaged goods.
Mm.
Has been and is extremely challenging. Um,
Mm.
but we are a profitable business. We're totally self-funded.
Wow.
And I think that the route that we went, is it something that I would do again? I
Yeah.
don't know. It was very, very challenging, but ultimately, I don't regret it at all. I think that we were able to kind of charter our own course and really build the way that we wanted to build without having to rely on venture capital.
Yeah. I think that's an important note there to take as part of the journey is kind of the margin you started with there, but and then shifting to today. What was that pivotal point of switching? Did you find a new co-packer or order a larger scale? I'm curious. What was that point?
Yeah, so at that time, Cameron, you kind of have two options. You either start sourcing um, non-quality ingredients, and then you sign it. You ultimately turn into every other brand on the shelf, or you
Mm,
just grow through scale. So
yeah.
I actually at that time we started to build our own supplier partnership. So instead of relying on the co-packers to source items for us, I did,
Mm,
and that ultimately built to scale. So as we kept growing, we kept on increasing our contracts with tomato suppliers, glass, caps, labels, everything,
mm,
and that allowed us to really understand the unit economics of the product, and get it down, obviously, to a much more sustainable business. But
mhm.
that took years, Cameron,
Yeah.
and a lot of volume. So it's kind of like what comes first, the cart or the horse. You need the
Yeah.
retail distribution in order to get the volume. In order to get your cost of goods down, you need to order the volume. So
Mm,
it was a really big pivot towards sales, Cameron, and making sure that we were building volume. And then as we kept building volume, cost of goods, were
mhm.
were directly impacted from that.
Can you recall on maybe that first big retail partnership that allowed you to increase that volume? So maybe the largest purchase order, that first one. I'm curious, what doors were those, if you can recall?
Yeah. So October 2017, we launched onto Amazon, which was
Mm,
big for us. I'd say that we're a digitally native brand, so that enabled us to reach households that we weren't able to normally get, shipping from Florida.
yeah.
And then our first large retailer on a national scale was Whole Foods. So March of 2018, we
Mm,
launched into Whole Foods on a national scale, and that really opened up a lot of doors for us and allowed us to ultimately scale at a much faster level.
incredible. Getting into some of the more like the science side of the sauce in general, I'm curious. When you started out causing heartburn, the other sauces you were using conventional sauces. But what are some of those switches? I mean, sourcing is a big part of it. I know you mentioned just tomatoes, just very basic ingredients. But what would you say are those biggest contributors into like conventional sauces that a lot of consumers use today?
Yeah, I would say, Cameron, excess sodium. I mean, there's so
Mm,
much sodium in everything, and salt is obviously a preservative that a lot of brands use. We don't. We have 60% lower sodium than any other premium sauce out there. So I think sodium is a big piece of it. Sugar, of course, is the
mm,
other piece of it. We are naturally a no sugar added item, and we're low carb friendly, keto, paleo friendly. So those types of diets really emerged back in the early days as well, and allowed those types of customers to also find our brands.
mm,
As far as common preservatives, a lot of them have like citric acid and phosphoric acid, and just different types of acidulants that ultimately would reduce the pH level of the sauce to make it more shelf stable. So you can accomplish that from a science perspective, using those types of preservatives, or using different types of sodium or sugar.
mm,
But ultimately, that's not the route that we took. So my grandma actually made her sauce with wine,
mm,
and all of the alcohol cooks off during the cooking process. It breaks down the acidity of the tomatoes, and it gives it just a great flavor. That's ultimately how we produce today.
mm. Incredible. What would you say marketing wise works best for you guys? And you're under a category that's definitely shifting into that more organic side. People are searching for that cleaner ingredient. I'm curious, what do you find that works well switching over to new consumers?
Yeah, so omni-channel is huge for us, Cameron. So
Hmm.
because we were, I guess, born on Amazon and born online,
Mm,
that really gave us a good foundation to ultimately grow.
hmm.
And I think that's a really um, important marketing ground for us, and for really anyone who wants to start a business, is really thinking about that bridge between online and retail, and that's more important than ever.
Mm,
Today there's so many digital only customers that only purchase online.
yeah.
You look at Gen Z and how they purchase groceries, and it's much different than how baby boomers would. So really meeting customers where they are and being able to invest in retail media. I think
Mm,
that's such a big function of any product based business that's working with retailers.
yeah.
Those are very important marketing channels that we still use today.
Mm. Something we haven't touched on yet is kind of the team build out along the way as well. So I'm curious, along those early days, what were those first hires? And in your opinion as well, I'm curious, what would you say are those first critical hires for a startup that's looking to grow? That I mean, started just as yourself.
Yeah, I would say, sales is really important, Cameron. I think a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up in playing office, myself included. In like the early days, you're spending all day designing websites and making
Mm,
marketing materials and doing all these things, but you don't have revenue coming in, right?
yeah.
Uh, so I think that sales is really important, and any early phase business is really starting on that is very important, and then ultimately hiring out what your weaknesses are, Cameron, is very important
Mm,
too. So in those early days, I think I'm really focusing in on the operations and on the finance of the business, so I could then focus in on the sales.
mm,
Were the first two pivotal hires that I brought in.
yeah. Getting into looking at Yo Mamas today, I'm curious with your consumers overall, what would you say is that main demographic? Omni-channel, I'm sure there might be a difference there, but I'm curious.
Yep, it would be millennial moms, 26 to
Mhm.
43. That's our main target market today, and really who resonates with our brand on the retail side. What's interesting, Cameron, is on the online side, it's about a 50-50 split between
Mm,
male and then female. So we actually have a lot more male buyers on .com, and it goes back to that concept of there's a huge shift happening in online grocery where a lot of um, consumers today are exclusively purchasing online.
yeah. So looking at the website today, you started out with just the marinara sauces. I'm curious, at what point did you get into product expansion? So I know Alfredo as well. I'm a huge fan of actually. I tried
Okay.
the products myself. I have to mention and endorse that it's the best sauce I've had by far. 100% serious. It's so good.
Thank you, Cameron. Yeah, so I think product extension is something that comes with time, Cameron. I'd say it's important to expand, but it's also important to focus in on your hero products and make sure that you're building out the market as best as you can without cannibalizing other sales. So we're
Mm,
still focused in on pasta sauces, salad dressings, condiments, pizza sauce, white sauce, and that's really how we built. We do have a line of protein pastas launching early next year, and a
mm,
clean line of cooking wines launching in a couple weeks as well. So
awesome.
really still focused in on expanding the pantry, but
Mhm.
our team is very strategic in how we build and making sure that the timeline obviously aligns.
Yeah. Looking at those products today, what would you say overall is the best seller?
Our pasta sauces are definitely our bread and butter of the business. That's how most customers find us, and then as they kind of discover the versatility of them, then they all ultimately move on to some of our condiments, dressings, pizza
Mm,
sauces as well. But yeah, I would say our pasta sauces are still very much how most customers find us.
incredible. So you guys have had tremendous growth. I mean, one of the fastest growing pasta brands out there. 192% year over year sales growth I saw. But with that, what would you looking back? What would you grant some of that rapid growth towards? I'm curious. Maybe retail expansion, product expansion, team. Just a couple notes. I would love to hear.
Yeah, I would say, we call it the three Ds, and that's distribution, distribution, distribution. So,
Yeah.
really focusing in on that and making sure that you're building the best possible product, but also
Mm,
getting it out, right? So, I think from an awareness perspective, we still have a long way to go. We're almost 8 years next May, and I tell our
wow.
team that we're in second grade now. So,
Yeah.
we still have a long way to go, but ultimately, I think the distribution focus that our team has built, Cameron, has been really key to driving growth, and that's not only on online and on retail, but we have a big focus on international growth as well. So we do export to 11 countries today,
Wow.
and that's how we align to our strategic vision of being a household brand name across the entire world.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's a note I would love to touch on right there. But team wise, working internationally as well now too. How is the team looking? Are you guys running pretty lean? I saw there was around 30 something members. Is that true?
Yes, yes. So
Wow,
we
it's
we have
impressive.
23 actually, Cameron. So
Wow,
uh,
that's
yeah, and
impressive.
then we're all in office in Clearwater, Florida, at our headquarters, and then our um, international and main warehouse is actually attached to the headquarters as well. So
Wow.
we're all together under the same roof, and it's definitely a small and nimble team, but we work very closely together, and it's been really important for us to be able to drive growth.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to cut this if you don't want to, but I'm curious if you'd be open to touching on this. But looking at, I mean, kind of the RFK and that shift and the food, that might shift with government as well
Yeah.
and the FDA. How do you see that playing out, especially in your category in the pasta side, cleaner ingredients? You mentioned all the gums and all of the unnecessary ingredients in conventional. How do you see those next few years playing out in your own category? I'm curious.
Yeah, so Cameron, I think it's a move that has been building up for decades, and I'm very personally happy to see it
Mhm.
finally unfolding. I think during COVID, Cameron, a lot of customers woke up to what they were eating because everybody obviously had to eat at home, and they
Mm,
started to look at their ingredients and really understand, oh, like, I shouldn't be eating this, or this isn't making me feel well. So I think COVID ultimately expedited what was inevitably going to happen in consumer packaged foods, where
yeah,
people were becoming much more aware of what they were putting into their bodies. In regards to RFK, and kind of this whole movement that's happening, even with like the the artificial dyes that are in all of our kids' cereals, and
yeah,
all these large corporations that are changing um, their formulations internationally and not doing the same thing for U.S. consumers. I think that the market's going to shift, Cameron. I think
mm,
people care. People are waking up, and personally, and from a business perspective, I think it's the direction that the market should be going.
yeah.
We shouldn't be utilizing these types of poisons, honestly, into our packaged food. So that's been part of our mission since day one, and
Mhm.
personally, I'm excited to see it, go more mainstream into how
For
how
sure.
some of these larger brands produce.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, Cameron, I would say a big philosophy that we've used is starting small, thinking big, and
Mm,
scaling quickly. And I think for any entrepreneur listening, don't be bogged down by all the red tape that it takes to start a business. Just start small. I
mm,
think that's such an important way. I think of our first run of pasta sauce was only 54 cases, right? So
mm.
if I started with producing 5 million jars at the cost of goods that we were ultimately at, we I wouldn't be here today, right? So
Yeah.
I think that starting small is such an important philosophy. Secondly, thinking big, I think that's a really important approach. You have to really set clear intentions as far as what you want to build. Do you want to be a well-recognized local brand? Do you want to be a national brand? Do you want to be a international brand? So really thinking big and setting those intentions, whatever they might be, is a really important philosophy. And then third,
Mm,
it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier, but scaling quickly is so
mm.
important. So if you're looking at more of a product-based business, scale is the name of the game, and making
Yeah.
sure that you're able to build up operations and finance and sales to support growth is a really important way
Mm.
to make sure that your vision and dream comes to life.
Incredible. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Yo Mamas at yomamasfoods.com.